after your graduation, you ended up working with one of the greatest architects in our generation,
Yeah.
Zaha Hadid.
At every level, we need to have people who have a focus on creativity.
Okay, so today's episode is going to be with the principal architect and founder of Vivek Shankar Architects here based in Bangalore. How are you today?
Doing well, Shivan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. This office is magnificent. Like it looks even better from inside than it did from the outside.
Yes,
So,
yes. Yeah. I think it's really about the process with which we work
mhm,
and the outlook towards the design. Is our office is really a reflection of that
mhm,
aspect.
mhm. And what did you focus on when you were like designing it?
We wanted it to be as flexible as possible. We wanted the spaces to be abundant with light,
Mhm,
natural ventilation, and we also wanted the flow between the different connection between floors to be quite seamless.
mhm,
So we've got these cutouts which run across the three floors, and which is the studio floors. And then we have a lower level which becomes the a library and a discussion space.
mm,
And the ground level is pretty much a more formal conference setup.
mhm. Is there any part of it where you thought this is to breed creativity and innovation in the office space because architecture is a field that's abundant in innovation and creativity?
Yes, very much. Very much. We wanted the space to, it should be when creative professionals, young professionals, we have trainees coming in here. They start as a trainee and they move on to become junior architects, and then they progress to climb up the different levels in the studio.
Mhm,
And then we have the mid-level management, which becomes the project architects,
mhm,
the senior project architects.
mhm,
And then we have the core management team, which is the HR and the CEO and me, the principal architect, who oversee the
mhm,
entire operations of the studio.
mhm,
So at every level, we need to have people who have a focus on creativity,
mhm,
who have a focus on not doing things in a stereotype way.
mhm,
It,
mhm,
it just somehow takes away the energy from what they would do at work.
mhm,
So the studio setup is such that you feel comfortable
mhm,
with the way you want to be in the studio.
mhm,
It doesn't really dictate as an environment to be rigid or to be a formal setup.
mhm. That sounds brilliant. Like
Yeah.
you probably put a lot more thought into building the office, and that probably, translates to a lot better in both creativity and architecture and just general workflow and flow state while working deep work. I'm sure you know about deep work.
Yeah.
So, like, did you always want to do architecture growing up?
I always had the fascination for mm, geometrical shapes. And I also found the liking and the fondness for geometry more in terms of three-dimensional properties of each geometrical form.
Mhm,
So, which means the moment I start thinking about anything which is 3D, it's like there is a space within it.
mhm,
And this was right from my probably uh, late school days and before I joined college. I had this sort of a thing playing in my mind quite constantly.
mhm,
And then, once I finished, uh, completed my 11th and 12th,
mhm,
then there was a much more firmness that I need to pursue a career in the creative
mhm,
profession.
mhm,
And that's when I chose to do architecture.
mhm. Yep, I believe you did your master's at the renowned AA School of Architecture in London. What do you do your bachelor's in?
A bachelor's I did in architecture
Okay.
in Bangalore at the
At
BMS College of Engineering.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And why did you decide to go on with the master's, just to expand your knowledge, expand opportunities, or was it more about building connections or?
Uh, I've always had read about uh, the works of masters architects when I was doing my bachelor's.
Mhm,
And then I found that a couple of them were from the, and there were others from different schools, renowned schools across the world. But what really fascinated me about the AA as I went towards the final years of my architecture was that there was a very clear process driven methodology in which the course was taught. It wasn't really getting right into the design, but it wanted to very thoroughly examine cities in terms of the dynamics of what changes constantly and how you record those changes. And once you record those changes, they're all using software which are simulated, and there are diagrams. So it's quite an elaborate process with which you start off recording an urban setting, or it means that that city has a very specific dynamic in terms of the population, in terms of the user type, in terms of the climate, and also the topographical characteristics of any specific geography in the world. There are very distinct characteristics. And the AA really went into the depth of understanding those very thoroughly and coming up with a set of a very clear framework within which you work. And that framework gives you the parameters on how do you need to engage, whether it's a set of buildings in that city or a specific building in that city, or it's a part of the city itself, which is urban planning. You know.
Yeah. I'm sure you worked with a lot of different architects from different schools, different colleges in different countries. What do you think separates your school, the AA, from other schools?
The AA is really one of a kind of a school. It's not having a campus. It's not having uh, you know a large number of buildings. It's just this very understated singular building which is in Bedford Square in London, and it's very unassuming from the outside. But the moment you go in, you see probably as you enter the reception area, you would have probably looked at a minimum of 8 to 10 different nationalities, within a very short span of time. And in my studio, when I did the masters, we had students from 28 nationalities, right? And the school is also having the undergraduate courses. And I find that the undergraduate courses also are far more diverse. You have from South America, North America, you have from the uh, Asian countries and East European countries. So there's a mix. So there is something unique as an learning energy, and also the way the courses are taught there. Otherwise, you wouldn't have such a diverse set of a crowd, a mix. And they all come there with very specific agendas of what they want to take back to their country and build their own careers.
Yeah, yeah. And after your graduation, you ended up working with one of the greatest architects in our generation,
Yeah,
Zaha Hadid. I hope I said that right.
that's right.
And like, how did you come across that opportunity? It's fascinating.
It's yeah, it is fascinating, and the experience was thoroughly enriching. Zahid's office almost has a sort of a very close association with the A, and she is from the A, and she's taught at the A. And Patrick Schumacher, who is now in charge of the studio and who's the director of Zaha Hadid Architects, runs a program at the master's level in the A. And so he's been closely associated with the A from several years. And the studio of Zaha Hadid is more of an extension of what the A is. So they work on a very similar process on live projects, on competitions across the world. But the process that they adopt is very much what the AA uses as a way of, examining urban setups and designing projects. So it's really the process which is just taken from the school, and then the studio uses it for projects which they do fascinating, really breathtaking work.
So the transition must have been seamless because
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
she must have been one of your professors for some
That's right.
classes.
Yes. So you have the professors also who, when they guide you through your work, we find that there are a few pointers and aspects which you can trace back to the work of Zaha Hadid.
Mm.
So you are actually inculcating some of those thoughts in the work that you do. And that's when it becomes interesting, because you know that this is not just being unreal, but it's getting built somewhere by the studio of Zaha Hadid Architects. So there is really that possibility to make that happen as a built project, physically manifest it as a project. And that's the exciting thing about the.
Yeah, and seeing that integration of theory into practicality must have been a formative experience for your architectural career to a very large extent.
Yes.
But working under Zaha Hadid must have been even more formative in the way that you probably implement some things or a lot of things that you learned from your time with her to this day. What would those things be?
Um, uh, it's really the sheer energy in the studio. The energy is so distinct because everything has got such a high intensity, right from the initial um, thinking of how you engage on the project, and then the process which um, goes through the different stages of the making of the concept. And then finally, when the concept presentation is being put together, you have the entire team in the studio. Then you have consultants from outside who assist in the engineering aspect of the design. There's a structural consultants, then there are sustainability design consultants. There are various experts who come in to make the design that much more reinforced and with practicality. The designs could look really out of the world, but you need to make them buildable, and they need to be executed with very specific certain codes adhering to structure. Then they have to also meet climatic requirements, and so certain other compliances. So all this is done with so much of earnestness and energy in the concept level itself. And that energy and that process is really what uh, made me to say that, yes, if I were to open a studio, and this is what I would take as a learning from this office of Zaha Hadid. And that is exactly what I have done with since the inception of the studio in 2002.
2002. So, how many years did you work under Zaha Hadid?
I worked with her for about a year and a half.
A year and a half, and then you moved back to Bangalore and you started your own studio.
That's right.
Like, what was that jump like? That's a massive jump from being under someone to taking the leap into entrepreneurship and management and architecture into starting your own firm in a developing country. What was that like?
There are various challenges in a country like India where if you bring ideas, architectural concepts which are not orthodox or which are not stereotyped, they're immediately branded as expensive designs, and which may not be buildable. So that's the initial response that you get from stakeholders and clients, that this is something which is going to cost too much, and how am I going to make this money out of a project like this? So it's really the balance that you strike between being innovative, which means being non-stereotype and causing a disruption in the entire, maybe for that context of that city or that project, where it really starts to question that it's not gone with a conventional setup, but there is something different about it. But that difference has to bring in certain benefits to the client. It can't be a difference because you want it to be different, and it gives you uh, the joy of making a project different. You need to translate that difference to the benefit of the client, and that's what we've been very articulate in doing. And our very first project, since the studio was set up, was in Bangalore, a commercial building. And this client was very excited when he saw our profile, the work that I've done at the work that I've done at Zaha Hadid. And he said that Vivek, I want a building which stands apart from any other building in the street. And this was in the central business district in Bangalore on St. Mark's Road. And we said, yes, of course, we can do that for you. And we started understanding what the design brief was and what we needed to achieve as space efficiencies, because for a client, the efficiency of space is so important because it's the income that he gets from leasing it. We can't compromise on the space efficiency. So we were very innovative with the facade. So we started seeing a facade which is not typically the glass facade that you have for commercial buildings. And we used a three-dimensional geometry to formulate the facade. And that came out very well. And that was really a path-breaking and iconic project in the city and some aspects in the country as well, because we used a rigorous 3D modeling to understand how we put together the different facets of that geometry. And we used a material from Hunter Douglas, which is a world-renowned company for cladding materials. And then, yeah, the project was, it just came out so well. It turned out to be with no disappointments at all. The client was happy, we were happy. He was getting good inquiries for the space to be leased. I mean, yeah, it was really a win-win.
That's really interesting, and I think what you've said there about Indian culture when it comes to unconventional things.
Yes.
I think Indian culture, even stepping away from architecture, is very close-minded to a very large extent. Right?
Yes.
Both in terms of education and general beliefs, practices, etc.
That's right.
So how do you break kind of that norm or conventional belief that architecture only has to be efficient? It shouldn't be about how it looks or how it may play out in the long run. How do you break that belief?
Oh, it wasn't easy to break that, Shivain. We really need to explain to a client on why you're innovating, and with the degree of innovation that you would do, where does he stand to benefit? Where does he stand to benefit in the long run? How does the value of the property appreciate when there is an innovation incorporated in it, a very purposeful innovation, versus a project which is very safe with the design, there is no exploration, and it just sort of fits into the crowd, has a limited shelf life. It has a limited shelf life simply because there are so many other buildings which look the same. Why would somebody want to come and lease out your space specifically? Right? Why would anybody go into a building which is new, but it looks like the building adjacent to it and the building in front of it? So it also means that for a client, it's more to do with seeing how he can upsell the product in terms of more to do with the company which would lease the space would also be looking for something which is different, right? And I think in a developing country like ours, there are multinationals, there are corporates who have seen the stereotype format for far too long. And if they have to build an identity for the company, they need to be in a space which has got an architectural uh, distinctness and a differentiation. So it was difficult, but we were very clear that we're not going to give in to doing work which is stereotype, which means we were very selective with the clients who we would want to be associated with. And we chose to work with clients who see the value with the innovation. There has to be a buy-in on why we are innovating. You can't impose a creative idea or a proposal and tell a client that go ahead and build it when he's not convinced. It's not going to work somewhere. Later it would either change the design, or the client is unhappy about it and it just doesn't align. So we, from the beginning till date, we are very careful that the clients who see the value in the work are the ones who see the benefit for themselves, and they're very clear that they've got a business strategy of how to use that innovation to monetize that innovative aspect.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting stuff, and that goes into probably a lot of sales and client and things, and like breaking that belief, especially in people that already believe that, oh, what's the good look on my building gonna do for me? That breaking that belief is pretty much impossible for a lot of people, and the fact that you've been able to do that, each one of your projects is like a creative masterpiece, if I may say myself, because each one looks different but has the same mission going or vision going through it in terms of innovation, creativity, breaking through the cultural norms of Indian architecture and building as a whole. And through that, what do you think was your first, true success which launched your firm into stardom, at least in Bangalore?
I think the first project was the project on St. Mark's Road, because that location is so prime in terms of real estate, and it's a very prominent artery which connects this, the business part of the city. You have prominent educational institutions there. You have offices. You have financial institutions in the vicinity of 2 to 3 kilometers. And this site, we were fortunate it to be not just a corner site, but it is a site which has got roads on 3 sides. And when you have a site which has roads on 3 sides, it means that you are given a great opportunity to play with the geometry and the elevation aspect of the building, because you've got a foreground to perceive that geometry. You immediately don't have a neighboring property which is a few meters away, and whatever you're trying to do sort of gets completely hidden by a neighboring property. So we didn't have those neighbors on 3 sides, which just gave all the more reason and the justification to be explorative. And yeah, I think that was really sort of launched the studio in terms of our what's our focus on design and what we really want to be as a studio. Those design principles is what we exhibited in that project. And from then on, it was like every project, people sort of related to us, okay, if it's this studio which has done this project, then yes, if we want a project which is different, why don't we approach Vivek Shankar Architects? So that sort of built on our client base, where we were also very clear that we just don't do the conventional work, because there are so many reasons to not be just doing the conventional work. There are various ways in which the building becomes a better place, a better experience to work in. It's more climatically, it works better. There are savings in terms of energy because you don't have just glass bringing all the sunlight into the building. So we have a very clear, set of points which we would explain to a client why their building has to have a facade which is different, why their building has to have a geometry which can be going away from, many other buildings which are done in such a stereotype manner.
Yeah, and once you have such a, unique piece of architecture or building in such a busy street, it must have become like a walking, talking marketing machine.
It was, yeah.
Uh,
It really it got into the right architectural journals. It was also featured in one of the leading European journals in Austria on the cover page, and there was various other architectural talks where they spoke about the process of the design of the building and how it has opened up an entirely different possibility of designing a facade.
Yeah, and how many clients do you think reached out to you just because of that one project? That must have been.
Yes, we had a good number of inquiries with that. There were a lot of people who were curious about why it was done as what they saw was done. They were more curious to understand what it was all about. And then there were clients who reached out to us with maybe for an apartment project or for a residential project or for a commercial project. But they wanted again something which is a clear differentiator in their projects. They don't want those projects to be like many other projects. And they saw that we had the capability to bring out that difference. So it really sort of gave us that credit of saying that, yes, we go through a process, but through the process, what we're able to achieve is a highly innovative product.
Yeah, and there was surely a factor of luck that went into it for your first project.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there's a lot of, smaller architects or entrepreneurs generally that don't have that breakthrough moment like as soon as they get into the game. What's your advice for them? Like, what do you think they should do until they get that, uh, unicorn to come to them and help them blow up their business?
I think it's a lot of patience and really standing by your beliefs, not making compromises because you feel that time is running out. Um, the more you stand by the beliefs that you want to build as an identity for your profession, especially the creative profession, I feel that you are respected more, but by a fewer people. You don't really get the masses coming to you. But you have the ability and the talent to create something different. It just can't be for the masses all the time, unless it's like a social housing project and you do something different and there are thousands of people using it. Well, that's a way you sort of brought out a disruption on a larger scale. But if it's more on a smaller scale and more towards like having an individual who's building a home or a corporate who's building their office space, then you just have to be very patient, and you need to be very clear about what's the process that you adopt, and what would your studio's take be on various aspects like the use of materials, the way you would structurally integrate the structure and the design. How do the two come together? So there can be a lot of educating the public on what your studio stands for. And that would definitely catch the attention of people who see that, okay, there is somebody who wants to make a difference here. Why don't we give them a project? So that time has to be really utilized while you're waiting for that project to come. It's about really making yourself understood with graphics, using social media. It's probably a website or giving talks. At certain, it could be talks for students, it could be talks for architects, but just making yourself heard that you're there to make a difference.
Okay. Since architecture is a field abundant with creativity, you follow a process which has three stages: research, design, execution. How do you use those combined with creativity to excel in all fields of your practice?
Uh, the research really is it becomes a backbone for what has to be subsequently translated into a creative content. And what we do in the research is primarily understand the site, understand the user, understand the uh, constraints of the site, and also look at the climatic aspects, the usability of the space. All this is examined in the research stage, and which frames or forms a framework for the design stage. Without a framework, any process tends to fail. So we take those parameters from research into design, and we very strictly adhere to those parameters around which we start building on the geometrical aspects of a project, the materials for the facade, the internal planning. All of it is done with what is being given to us from the research stage. So this is quite seamlessly done in every project, irrespective of the scale of the project or the typology of the project. And we also use a lot of external data, which is from maybe works of masters, architects, and projects which have found to be successful because they have very specific parameters in them. So our team does the research, we infer from the research, and then those inferences are drawn into the design stage.
So, following the research and design stage, the execution stage would bring all of the team, all of the clients, and you know, the other stages in the process and the information gathered together into an actual actionable project. And how does that usually pan out?
The execution stage is primarily a technical documentation of the design stage. So between design and execution, we have what is called as a schematic stage. We have a design development stage. Then we have a tender stage, which is where the project is, the documentation is used to identify suitable contractors and project management companies for executing the project and to oversee the execution of the project. So between the design and the construction stage, we have all the engineering aspects which get integrated. And the execution stage is when we issue the drawings, which we call as good for construction drawings. You can't execute any project without a good for construction drawing. And those drawings are the most vital documents which a contractor utilizes to execute the project. Otherwise, there is nothing for him to execute at the site without those set of drawings. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. And I believe now you implement programming into your design stage, and that must have not been there about 20 years ago,
Right.
along with a lot of other things. So what do you think are the major changes in both technology and culture around architecture, and how the clients perceive certain changes over the course of 20 years?
Yeah. So the clients are far more, they are more seeking differentiation today because there's so much of immense competition, especially in the real estate market. And also with corporates who would like to bring out the identity of their company with their building, with their architecture, with the facade. That's much more, they're more, I would say, they're more aware of it. They're more particular about it compared to what it was earlier. And I find that this pattern is merely because cities are becoming so monotonous with stereotype constructions, and they find that a lot of the buildings are consuming so much more energy than they're actually meant to be because they're not being efficiently designed. So that awareness has very been, I would say, quite adequately been passed on to potential clients and stakeholders in the real estate market, and they're much more um, they're much more cautious now about what are the benefits of the design and what are the pros and cons of the design.
And social media must have revolutionized the marketing process, the client outreach process in terms of architecture. And like, how are you using it to your advantage as a firm?
We are quite careful with our engagement with social media, because since we're a design-centric firm, we don't want information to just be out there with an audience who can't really relate to it. But at the same time, we use the social media to talk about our work, where we have projects which have certain key differentiators. We translate those projects into posters, which highlight the differentiating points in the project, and we post it on social media. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to wrap up, what would be your advice to any like young aspiring both architects and entrepreneurs to, bite the bullet, start learning, start action, like taking actions towards their goals in both the entrepreneurial field and the architectural field?
Yeah, I think that's a lovely question, and my answer to that would be you need to be passionate about taking risks. You can't be you have to be really sure-footed about taking risks, and those risks are not merely to be different, but to really unearth the potential within you. Unless you take risks, you really don't know what you're good at. You just sort of merge with the crowd. You can be good at what you're doing, but there are so many other people who are also doing what you're doing. So if you want to differentiate yourself, you really have to say that I'm going to adopt this technology in my business, or I'm going to take this path which is not being taken by many others, and I'm going to test it and see what it gives to my business and what it gives to me as a way of building an identity for myself and for my company. Uh, and the next important thing is to be uh, extremely aware of the fact that there's so much of information around us today, right from what you get as what is on YouTube, what is out there in the virtual world. There's so much of information. So what is it that you can learn from that? What is it that you can take from that? And who are the entrepreneurs who are really standing out in that space? Are the ones who have already sort of very clearly decided that there is so much of scope for differentiation. There is so much of scope to not take the beaten path. Those are the ones who are standing out in that crowd, which is that really crowded space. And I think that's where entrepreneurs have to start seeking that value which they can benefit and they can also give to the society. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think a lot of young entrepreneurs, they struggle with differentiation. That's the main thing. Like, there's already like 50 of what you have on the market.
Right.
And what your firm has done is brilliant in the way that it's revolutionized how people look at architecture.
Right.
And that's a useful skill that anyone can learn and anyone can implement into their entrepreneurial journey and their everyday life.
Right.
And that's something brilliant that you've put out there.
Yeah.
Mr. Vivek Shankar, I'll have his website in the description, and if anyone wants to visit that, all of his projects and all of his future steps with his firm are going to be on there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shemaine.